Hello, LinkedIn family. I am so excited to have everyone here. We've got, it looks like already 14 or 15 people coming in on LinkedIn. YouTube, we're a little low right now, but I know you'll be showing up. I am so excited to talk about recurring revenue models today and my two very special guests. And I'll let them introduce themselves in just a moment. But the reason we're doing this, and maybe you're like, well, Bryn, you usually do LinkedIn and social selling. What's this recurring revenue model thing? And I will tell you that this really is the mission for 2024 for so many businesses. Larger businesses that may not have had this before are starting to look at SaaS and other models that have been very successful. So we're talking with two of our experts today, both friends of mine. Oh, and we have a fourth coming in, which is great. I'm going to let Paul, yay! Excited to have you here. So let me drill this up. So we've got really guys that I'm just adore in sales. I'm going to go around and have each of you introduce yourselves. John, I'm going to have you start. Talk about who you are and what your model is a little bit.
Sure. Hi, I'm John Stopper. I'm the founder of North Star Performance Strategies. I've been in business for 11 years. I work 90% of my clients are software companies. My career has been in software. 10% of my clients are consulting firms. And I specialize in helping them with revenue growth strategies and selling enterprise sales.
Terrific. Thank you. Absolutely love working with you. I'm going to go to Dan next. Dan, if you could say hello and just like a 1 minute about you and what you do.
Sure. My name's Dan Pfister, and I run a company called Winback Labs, and that's all customers. But the reason I wanted to, be on this panel was for 25 years I had a company that was a subscription-based company, and we had generated over 50,000 subscription. Thought I might have something useful to contribute to this.
I love it. And Paul, welcome. If you want to just do a quick little intro.
Sure. I did not hear at all what Dan said. I'm not quite sure why. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine. Dan was breaking up a little bit. So
okay.
Yep.
Hi, my name is Paul De La Garza. I own a business called High Performance Business Solutions. I've been in business for approximately 13 years. And predominantly, I do executive coaching based on two disciplines. One of them is leadership, and the other one is sales. I have had the pleasure of working with Bryn now for a while, and we're working together on a couple of things to try and generate some, shall we say, a passive income process through Bryn and her team. And predominantly, my business market segment is CEOs of small businesses, small and mid-sized businesses. I work mostly with the real estate and the finance industry. And now I'm beginning to expand it to other areas that are outside those two primary industries. So that's in general.
Awesome.
Who I am and what I do.
I'm going to have everyone just stay as close to your microphone as you can. That would be awesome.
Sorry.
No, you're good. That's awesome. All right. So this is going to be a fast round robin, 25 minutes tops. And we're going to go through, I think we have 7 questions. So we're going to quickly go through. And I'm just going to ask the questions and leave it to you gentlemen to kind of share your insights in a minute, 90 seconds. And I'll start in the same order and then I'll go mix it up. So what is passive or recurring revenue models? What are passive and recurring revenue models that you've seen succeed? So John, I'll start with you on that.
Okay, well, with my clients, it's the subscription model is standard. In fact, I don't know of any software company that doesn't have a SaaS or a subscription model. The key to the success of it is really providing outstanding value. Your retention is key. So you need a 90+ retention rate or your valuation will take a substantial hit. So companies are measured on that, and that's why they build strong customer support, state-of-the-art software, make sure the updates are occurring every month, things like that, to make sure there's a great experience because our valuation is based on not just the increase or growth of new subscriptions, but also the retention.
Love that. Terrific. Dan, same question.
My answer is going to be very similar to John's. Like,
Gosh, I don't know why, but I'm not hearing Dan.
Oh, okay. We can hear Dan. So
Okay, all right. We'll just
wait
leave it
for
at that.
me. Yep. Go ahead,
Okay.
Dan.
Basically, like, I'd like to echo a lot of things that John has said, and just really hit hard on the retention. The retention is just everything, and because you've already got that customer and they keep coming back every month, and the upselling is like one of the easiest sales you're going to ever have. So if you deliver that value, you'll get the retention, and if you got the retention, you'll have their ear for the upsells.
Terrific. Terrific. So, Paul, same question to you. Passive or recurring revenues that you've seen even in your clients that have been successful?
I think that the essential element in order to maintain that continuity is to ensure that there's a practice of educating the consumer, maintaining an established relationship process, but not just establishing a relationship process, but unfortunately, on occasion, the relationship process begins to presume that by virtue of the relationship, that customer is going to be there indefinitely. And more often than not, that's not the case. So what I've seen as a really huge practice is to ensure that you are refreshing the value that you bring to the table by seeking to understand the dynamics of change that the consumer goes through, essentially.
Excellent. Excellent. So I love these perspectives. I'll say the recurring passive revenue. So there are tons, and SaaS has been doing this forever and ever. In fact, we even had a comment from Jess that said, starting to look at SaaS late to the game if you are not. That's true. But other models, other companies are looking at this recurring revenue stream, whether it's membership sites. Dan talked about his subscription site, even just this reoccurring month after month, working with the same client. It's not just a one deal and then re-sign every month, but maybe we have a 12-month coaching, a 12-month training. And so that's going a little bit more. So I look for every way possible to wiggle recurring revenue and subscriptions into about every business I work with, early stage to global enterprise. Thank you, Jess, for that insight. We appreciate it. So we are going to hop into question number 2, and I'm going to go backwards and start with Paul. How do you decide which model to invest time, resources, money, and energy in? Whether that's you or a client. If you're this could also for you guys, if you're thinking about, a client I've worked with, how did you help them decide where to put?
The primary thing is that we need to compare the objectives, the revenue and growth objectives of that particular business, and then make sure that we have a very clear understanding in terms of what the market is like, what are the dynamics of the market, what is the demographic, and so forth. The compatibility factor between the objectives of that individual company and the demographic is very, very important. But more so, the important factor beyond that is that we have a clear compatibility between the pain or pleasure point of that client and the service or product that that particular business actually employs. Sometimes there's a disparity. Sometimes a particular business is going to project to sell something without any regard as to what the pain or pleasure or need points, the change points of the client.
Awesome. Thank you for that insight. Dan.
Okay, that was the consumer facing part. So I'll just take the company facing part then. Your subscription at a low cost. It's got to be scalable. If it can help the value proposition, so selling is easier. That's a big deal. Think Adobe, right? They might have charged like $900 for the suite up front, or you could get it monthly for like much less, like maybe $89 a month, whatever. I don't forget the numbers, but the idea is that that helps your value proposition, right? Much less money up front.
Yeah.
I could go on and on, but
You could add one more insight's great, and then we'll ask John.
Sure. The idea that it's got to be scalable for different types of customers. We had customers that were like mutual fund companies, and we had customers that were individuals. So it's got to work. So you work for both, big and small.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And you know, with SaaS, you can have hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in recurring revenue from one client, or you could have, you know, LinkedIn, right? So my Sales Navigator recurring revenue is something like $150 per person on my team, right? And so that's a little bit smaller and manageable, but all of them are building, right? So I love that there's there's the two sides of recurring revenue that people have to choose which one makes the most sense, or do you have both available? Because also LinkedIn will have a company that has, you know, 5,000 reps, and so that's a much larger recurring revenue. Again, that's in SaaS. And John, let's end this question with you on how do you decide which model to invest time, resources, money, and energy in?
You know, I could just give you a perspective on the model that I selected, which was not the low-cost model. I sell through PE or venture firms or investors at the CEO level. So I chose a very high recurring revenue model. And so I'm a monthly retainer. It could be 20 to 50K, depending, even 100K, depending on the size of the organization. Now, I'm looking at a very small TAM, or total addressable market. So I want to, you know, work with fewer companies, but at a higher price point, right? As opposed to going to a more of a mass market, if you will. So just a different model, and that's the one I chose.
And if I can just kind of ask you, because part of your model is also when you help them make money, you make money, right? So can you just talk about, can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, because the work I do is so highly measurable. So I help grow revenues, right? Through strategies. I do coaching. I have a program called The Compass, which is how to do enterprise deals. You know, these are transactions that could be in the millions, tens of millions of dollars in lifetime value. So I'll do a base retainer plus a % of the recurring revenue. Typically, I do a 1 month MRR, monthly recurring revenue. So whatever the value of that deal is, what they're getting paid per month, I get that as a commission, if you will. So that's the fixed part and a variable. And that way I have skin in the game, and I'm working like really hard for them to be successful, and they're happy to pay those fees.
I think that's fantastic, and I love hearing those success stories. So, and you have many, so I love that. So number 3, what are the key strategies for optimizing pricing in a subscription-based model to balance customer acquisition and retention? So let's start with Dan.
Okay. As far as optimizing pricing, I guess there's thing that worked really well for us was asking people what they thought a product like this would be worth. And that gave us a ballpark. And then what we did was we created 3 tiers, a high, middle, and low tier. And we started moving those around. And what we did is we always tried to aim for the middle. So we made the middle one just a little bit less expensive than the top one, so that would people pay that extra piece, pay that extra money to get that extra value? And if they would, if it never, we would move the price up. But we keep moving it around, and after about a year and a half, we got our pricing really nailed down nicely.
So I love that.
Those 3 tiers, by playing with pricing for 3 tiers.
So, you know, I love that. And a lot of times we'll start by bringing someone in to a training program, and then we earn the right for them to stay on for the $97 a month coaching program, right? And so, but we do have different tiers, right? We have tiers where they can just kind of do self-study and then come in. There's the tier where we have one-on-one coaching, and you know, and they come and they may move into coaching, like the group coaching afterwards. So there's just lots of different pathways in. So I love that you talked about that. Paul, what about you? What are some strategies for even just thinking about what will someone pay monthly? How would you go about kind of coming up with that number?
Well, there are a couple of things that I would do. First of all, I want to make sure that I have really segmented the market accurately. You want to make sure that for all practical purposes, the pricing that you are going to actually present is in fact within the reach of the individual that to whom you are conveying your message. The other situation is, and this is the next thing I would say, is that this is always the case. You want to make sure that you have a value-based pricing. In other words, you want to make sure that there is an essence of a value that is meaningful to the client, so that then you can really justify the actual pricing. Because one of the things that they always say, you will never really eliminate price sensitivity from a client, but what you can do through value is minimize it. Then another component would be potentially tiered pricing, depending on a number of different types of packages, duration, and content. So that, just to name two or three, that's what I would do.
I love it. And John?
Yeah, I love the emphasis on value. So the way I help my clients price is we look at the value we're going to bring, and I identify 6 types of value: efficiency, effectiveness, risk mitigation, scalable growth, customer experience, and trend. And they're in ascending order of value. So if you're selling efficiency, which 90% of people's solutions are efficiency value props, meaning my offer is going to help you do your job faster, better, cheaper. Well, that has the lowest value. And so CEOs and executives that have to fund that investment, it's a nice to have. I care that you're more efficient, but not that much. So you have to go up the value chain. So I, in particular, focus on scalable growth and risk mitigation. Your business is at risk if you don't invest in this area. Why would you not pay this price to mitigate that risk? It's a different conversation, and you have to have it with different levels of people. So just to play on that, that's how I help companies establish their pricing.
Love that. Love that. Okay, number 4 in our fast round robin. Here we go. Oops. In planning out the model, what could you expect in ROI, in time, and revenue? Or at least how would you plan that? So, John, I'm going to start with you.
Do you mean, I'm not quite sure I understand.
So I guess it's ROI in the time that you've invested to roll out this program.
Oh, I see. Okay. I mean, you have to, it depends on what your product or service is, right? Some software products, you're talking years. And so for example, some sophisticated, we'll take Salesforce, very common, well-known product. The ROI on that product is 3 to 4 years. It takes a year just to install it. They got to train the people, and you're paying all that time. So by the time it gets embedded in your organization and you're getting value from it, 3-4 years. And a lot of people argue today that they never get value out of it. But what they've done that is so brilliant is they play the risk mitigation, which is everybody uses Salesforce. Why would you dare risk your business by not having Salesforce? And what we really sell is, if you don't have Salesforce and your salespeople leave, they walk out with all your customer data. So by having Salesforce, you maintain control of that. So it's a risk mitigation play, and that's why they charge a premium. The actual value they give to the users is arguably minimal.
Interesting. I love that perspective. Yeah, the fear of loss is pretty big. How about you, Dan? What are your thoughts?
I think that this idea of what's the payback period is huge. And the longer the payback period, the more you've got to have in your back pocket. Leave, or there's a high cost of leaving. But basically the idea is, you've got all this investment in technology. You might have to create all your software ahead of time. Even if it's consulting, there's still a ton of programs you got to put together, to give them that, to walk them through your process. That was one of the things. That's the reason I got into WinBack, actually, was because it was so much easier to win them back than to go and get a new one. And so our payback period for WinBack was really, really short. So yeah, so basically so many of the costs are up front. So you've really got to be able to.
Great insight. Paul.
Well, I hope I'm understanding your question correctly, Brent, but as a matter of fact, I'm going through this exercise with a couple of clients today. The first thing that we do in trying to put our arms around the ROI is, first and foremost, the customer acquisition cost, especially in the context of a subscription service. And surprisingly, this is something that not a lot of people really track as a unit. In other words, a customer acquisition cost itself. Mm-hmm. The other component that I think is really very important is the churn rate, meaning, you have a turnover. So you have some people that will be with you and project it, and you have empirical data that can help you do that, and then they will unsubscribe and they will cease the service, and then you'll have new ones. And then, of course, the overall, what I would call the operational efficiency in terms of how well the costs are being managed effectively, and all of that with a number of other things that I think are fairly fundamental are the ones that we were focused on to generate the ROI.
Yeah, and I love that. It's true. People really don't think about customer acquisition costs nearly as much, or the loss of that.
It's surprising because they have a broad general process, but as far as being able to really identify exactly the efficiencies of that, the customer acquisition costs, a number of them do, but a good number of them don't.
So I'm going to leave this. We're going to start with you, Paul, on this. How can entrepreneurs effectively leverage their social proximity, who they know, to grow their business without pitching and turning off their warm market?
Well, I'm going to say that in part I've learned this from you. The first thing is you have to really focus on developing a sense of credibility and relationship building based on performance and based on you really being perceived as a trusted advisor, as per se. In other words, that you have a level of competencies that people can say, you know what, I am going to actually sit through one of these webinars and so forth. So the second thing that I think is essential, and this is what I refer to, I learned this from you, is you need to educate and inform. You need to really see that you have got the essence of the competencies to be able to really offer value from which eventually people are going to benefit. And then probably one of the most important things that you could do, and again, you've reminded me of this, listen carefully to what your client wants, and then, this is an emphasis that you've given me, Bryn, seek permission. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember telling me this. Seek permission.
I tell everyone that.
Say, are you okay if we send you the following information? Can we facilitate an additional level of conversation so that we can provide a presentation of the value that we have? So these are some of the highlights.
That's great. And I know, John, you have to leave at the bottom of the hour.
I pushed back.
Oh, did you?
Before, yes. So
you're the best. Okay. Well, I'll still go to you, and then we'll end with Dan on this one. Entrepreneurs, and I know you mostly work with, although the CEOs of a lot of these SaaS companies would consider themselves entrepreneurs, some, right?
Sure.
Potentially. Well, for and John's clients, John, you're in enterprise mostly, but what are your thoughts around social proximity and who you know that knows who you want to know?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to what Paul said, but my approach, I have a little saying, proximity sells. And so when I'm working with salespeople, we're not looking just at social proximity. We're looking at geographical proximity, educational proximity, role proximity, industry proximity, anything, I'll call it a hook to start a conversation. Hey, I saw that you went to this university. my son went, we're looking for things, common ground to start the conversation. It's called small talk, but that's how people will engage if there's that some level of proximity. I've had a client that was, in New York City. Hey, I'm in New York. I mean, that's a classic salesperson thing, right? Can I stop by to see you? It's a physical proximity thing. So
Yeah, and it works.
We
It
use all,
absolutely works.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've had people do that. I've had connections. I have a connection in London who I had never met, flew out to New York. I'm taking a trip in, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, you're proximate.
and I didn't, they just said they're going to be here. So, and Dan, let's have you talk a little bit about social proximity and warm market referrals versus pitching.
Sure. Paul talked about this already to a degree, but the idea that you want to provide a lot of value. You want them to have confidence that you really know your stuff. And so, a lot of people, they hold back. They only give you so much, like for free. And what I found is that the people who are the DIYers, they're going to do it themselves. They're going to do it themselves no matter what. So give them everything you've got. Really show them that you've got something special. Show them that your framework, why it works so well. Between doing it, there's a massive gap, and I always try to help people if I can. And this reminds me a lot about you, Bryn. Actually, when we first met, you helped me like crazy, and without asking for anything in return. I ended up becoming a client of yours, and the reason was because I trusted that you weren't just there for the money; you were there to help. And if we became a client, that was great. If I wanted more value, and I think that you pace that beautifully. And another thing that you do beautifully is you'll still challenge people. You'll be afraid to lose the deal because you challenge them, and I love that too. So there's my Bryn.
Well, I thank you. This was certainly not meant to go there, but thank you. And I do, and the it's interesting. I challenge people, and a little bit is, hey, I want to deliver, right? Like, and so yeah. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. But
hey, Bryn, just a point to that. One of the things my mindset is when I'm working with a customer, I'm thinking of my network and how I can get them business. So I call you, for example, right? Because people need LinkedIn training. So I know that, hey, I'm helping you get business, and that's how we build a strong relationship. And at some point you'll be helping. So I have a whole pool of people I'll call and say, hey, here's an opportunity for you.
Yeah, one of the things we talked about today on your website is building out a partner page. How can I build out a page where I can refer people out? And I'm like, that's just awesome, right? So I love that. I think that's great. All right, number 6. What are the most common challenges entrepreneurs or business owners face when transitioning from a traditional revenue model to recurring model, and how can they overcome them? Dan, I'll start with you.
Okay, so we're doing this part with this one to death, but when when you're selling your program, right, like as a one-time sale, acquiring the customer is front and center. But when you're doing a subscription model, you've got to resell them basically every month. So you've really got to be able to focus on the retention end. I mean, you've got to become really, really strong on the retention end. And I think, and don't just talk to your current customers and ask them what it'll take for them to keep them happy. Talk to the customers that you've lost. Find out why they've left. They're the only people who can really tell you why people are leaving, and then work from there.
So I love that. And that's one of the reasons I'm so thrilled for you to be here, right? So when they're transitioning, right, talk to your clients, what didn't you have that would have kept you here? I think that's a brilliant thought. John, on that one.
Yeah, I lived this. So in the early aughts with software, I was a CEO of a company, and we were transitioning from a traditional licensing model to a SaaS model. We almost crashed the company because, in a traditional model, say we close a deal for $1 million, well, we would get paid that in 30, 60, 90 days. Everybody's happy, big chunk of money coming in. Well, all of a sudden, the SaaS model, you're only getting $83K a month, and you still have your same cost, right? So we had to, boy, we ran out of cash. We had to go out and take loans against our contracts to get. Now it's a hockey stick. Once you get over that hump, then when the SaaS models start, it scales and kicks in, then you're golden. But that transition period, make sure you have plenty of cash or access to capital to help you bridge that transition period, because it'll go like a trout and you're underwater pretty quick.
Oh, that's very interesting. And maybe that's why a lot of people make this transition when they get seed money. So, right. So that they get investors and then they make that transition. So I love that. Paul, your thoughts on this?
Well, to some degree, John, I'm reiterating a little bit about what you just said, because one of the biggest things that I've seen with clients and frankly myself is the cash flow variance. Because you have, instead of having a continuum, you do have cancellations and sometimes the consistency of payment timing and subscription renewals, new clients, and so forth. And if your costs are not aligned in accordance to that variable, then and you don't have that margin of cash to be able to do that, you are putting yourself on the line. The other component is, of course, not having a track on your customer acquisition costs, which I mentioned earlier. But customer retention also is a critical component of something like this. Unfortunately, again, customer retention is in many cases, and it's been with some of my clients, there's almost, because of the relationship component, there's a misunderstanding of the power of relationship instead of just simply maintaining that reaffirmation of value. So when you combine all these things together, okay, and you have a couple of other variables like the efficiencies of your operation and so forth that are cost effective and so forth. But those are some of the challenges that I think your typical entrepreneur is going to deal with, the subscription base.
Great insight. And Dan?
We're on to question 7 now?
Oh, we started with Dan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dan, with question 7.
Hey, somebody's got to pay attention.
Right. Thank you. You won me back. Okay. How can entrepreneurs integrate sustainability and ethical practices into their recurring revenue models to appeal to a modern customer? And the reason I brought this up is and from a consumer perspective, I'm watching like the choices people are making based on, are they shooting my chickens with hormones or not? Are they like they're sustainable, ethical practices, even political alignment to companies or misalignment are making decisions. People are making decisions on who they work with. So I'm curious in integrating. So sustainability is certainly, more of a consumer driven, but ethical practices. What do businesses need to do to appeal? And I'm going to say modern consumers, younger customers who care about these things. And they're really working with people that align with their values. That's the word, their values. So Dan, why don't you start there?
You've definitely got to understand the values of your customer base. You've got to be aligned with them. I mean, the cost of acquiring a customer that you're not aligned with is going to be so much higher than one who you don't align with. And I remember, and this can even get really, really micro. I mean, I remember hearing a famous marketer, Dan Kennedy, he talked about stuttering, and he was just talking with stuttering, and then there's these people who stuttered, or they stuttered when they were younger, and they felt that connection. So the connection that similar values have are really important.
That's awesome. Paul, and I'll end with John on this.
I think that especially with the younger market, you want to make sure that you have a very clear understanding in terms of what materials you're going to be employing. And so they have to be responsibly sourced, and there's got to be an element of sensitivity to ethics, environment, etc. Okay. The other thing is that maybe you want to make sure that if you do have a reliance on the supply chain, that you make that transparent, that you make sure that people understand exactly what it is that you're using, because that is a reaffirmation of the compatibility between your services and the value system of that particular client base. And of course, anything ranging from educating your client base in terms of the labor practices that you embrace and follow, and overall educating the consumer in general terms about how you are a ethics oriented, very socially conscious individual, so that they can see that they are doing business with the right player.
I love that. And John.
I was starting to think, I'll tell you the issue that I'm running into that is really at the forefront of workers today is the whole work from home, be back in the office. And being aligned around that issue, companies are mandating workers are come back to the office, some 4 or 5 days a week. So that means I just can't hang out on Zoom doing my work. I got to be on site. And they want to make sure you're reinforcing being there on site. And there's a big battle because all of a sudden these younger workers got comfortable, 2 incomes, the husband's watching the kids in the late afternoon while the mother works and vice versa. And all of a sudden they got to go out and get home care, an au pair or something. And it's putting tremendous strain on workers and management today. It's a huge social kind of issue that's causing a lot of stress. So you really, in addition to these, sustainability and ethical issues, you do have to be aligned with what's going on there and adapt your business to that issue. It's real.
It absolutely is. And part of, I think that attracting a modern employee, a younger employee, is that flexibility in that culture. And I just go back to one of my favorite, although it's so controversial now, but one of my favorite movies when I was younger of all times was 9 to 5. Yeah, they kidnapped their boss. That aside, the idea of the flexible hours and the part-time moms and the ability to do all, and everything became much more efficient and effective. And, I look at that, it was a movie before its time, but, in today's world, I really think that we have to take a look at the whole employee, not just the 9 to 5er. And when we can do that, we can absolutely attract better talent, more effective talent. And we have an overseas team. As long as they're getting their work done, they don't have certain hours that they have to be working. They just have deadlines that they have to meet. And I think when we can start to adapt some of those things, we do create a culture of highly effective and efficient folks. So, guys,
If you look at Stan's comment there, this is what executives are telling employees: you can work remote, but you're not going to get promoted, and you're not going to be able to make higher income. So that's
interesting, Stan. Yeah. That's really interesting. And we do have a. Make sure you make it easy and obvious for a client to cancel. Oh, this is interesting. And we do that too. Lots of trouble comes when you hide or make it difficult to cancel. Keep clients that want to be with you, not because you hold them hostage or make it hard to cancel. We actually will send out an email 3 days before we renew with a link to cancel for our reoccurring revenue, because it's important that we do that. And you can go on our website and frequently answered or asked questions. And we have go to socialsaleslink.com/goodbye. And you can go there because we want that. And we have people that come back months later because they feel like they were heard. So I love that. Guys, this was really fun. We have a whole bunch of other things that kind of went in here, and I'm going to go back and look in the comments. And there, we had on LinkedIn well over 30 people at our height. And I appreciate it. We even have one in YouTube right now, which I love when that happens because that's new for us. But thank you guys for being here and sharing your insights and your expertise. John, if people want to get in touch with you, why would they want, who do you want to talk to, and how would they get in touch with you?
I'll talk to anybody. My specialty is helping professional sales leaders and their companies with enterprise sales. It's a different, unique skill set. So that's my focus. You can reach me at jstopper@northstar8.com. You could go to my website, northstar8.com, or see me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Paul.
You can reach me at highperformance-solutions.com. Who I would love to talk to are essentially entrepreneurs, people that are in enterprise or corporate levels, that are in leadership positions, because I focus predominantly on that along with sales development. So I'd love to have an opportunity to have a base conversation with you.
Love that. And Dan.
I help based companies win back their lost customers. And check me out on LinkedIn, Dan Pfister. I got a ton of articles. There's gold buried in your past customers. Everything you need to know about win back. Interview with Bryn is there. So there's a lot there to consume.
Well, I've so enjoyed this, and I know that you guys have brought lots of fabulous insights to the LinkedIn world. And guys, thanks so much for joining us, and make sure that you connect and follow these gentlemen for additional insights.
Thank you, Brent, for the invitation.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Bye-bye.